market in the world. And even in China, we see significant progress. That country's leaders have established a domestic target of a 20% reduction in energy intensity by 2010. China also has aggressively developed its renewable energy sector. It has established a goal to raise the proportion of renewable energy in the primary energy supply to 16% by 2020, up from 7% today. All of these activities in all of these countries are vitally important. But as we all know, isolated actions on the part of individual nations are not enough. We need a global solution. I believe the Kyoto Protocol was a remarkable achievement, but it is really only a first step. Yes, many developed nations are a part of Kyoto, and some may, in fact, reach their targets under the agreement. But others are having great difficulty, and the combination of Kyoto's short-term targets, plus the fact that it does not include the United States or Australia, and that it lacks specific commitments for China and India, should force us to consider a new approach. The only question is how. How can we create a framework that achieves real reductions in global emissions while engaging all nations, industrialized and not, in the work of protecting the climate? How can we move the current round of discussions of a post-2012 framework at the conference in Bali so we establish a fair and effective framework, one that deals with not only reducing emissions, but also with adapting and responding to the climate change that we are already experiencing? And how can we work to assure that the technology we will need to meet our environmental objectives is available and affordable and actually deployed? So the post-Kyoto, post-2012 framework has to integrate different approaches. Binding emission targets make sense for developed countries, but it is the height of naivete to think that China, India, and the other emerging economies are going to agree to binding targets anytime soon. But without China and India on board, we are also making it very unlikely that the United States or other key industrialized countries will agree to commitments either. The United States needs to be a part of that discussion, and this is something that the current U.S. administration has not been willing to consider. Many business leaders in America, as elsewhere, now realize that a carbon-constrained future is imminent. They want certainty about what rules and regulations are going to be so they can plan accordingly. And they see the opportunity to create climate-friendly products and technologies that not only meet environmental objectives, but also help their bottom lines. And we need to raise up, support, and encourage the states and Congress and the private sector as they design climate solutions, because it is these solutions, especially at the national level, that will provide the United States with the good faith and the credibility once and for all to exert a leadership role on this issue at the global level. It's hard to overstate the potential impact of mandatory climate legislation passing the U.S. Congress. It is going to happen, and soon. And in acting on this issue, Congress will provide the United States with a platform to lead the way toward a binding international treaty.
The major focus of the National Roundtable is creating for Canada middle and long-term targets to achieve the kind of goals we've been talking about this morning. In looking at this, I think it's very clear that what we see for Canada is that the targets under Kyoto are probably the most difficult of any G8 country. Currently, Canada is about plus 35 from its 1990 baseline. We're now 2 months from Kyoto. Monsieur Dion, our Liberal opposition leader, has estimated the cuts for thermal electricity at about 38% and for oil sands about 45%. These are really, really difficult challenges in terms of looking at it. The rapid rate of population growth and economic growth in my province of Alberta, for instance, it's been approaching 10% some years in terms of the rate of economic growth. It's the fastest growing oil field in the world currently, and that certainly raises challenges, as we've heard before. Canada is a country like Russia, has cold temperatures and huge distances. But most important of all, in comparing us with the European Union, is that Canada is not only a huge emissions producer from our lifestyle and from our role as a consumer, but we're also a huge emission producer because we are a producer of energy for other countries, principally the United States. And it is the combination of those two which makes us different than from many of our colleagues working in the international negotiations from the developed countries. In terms of looking at the middle and the long term, which the National Roundtable is trying to do in its report right now, then what we're trying to do is emphasize we must begin immediately. This is not an argument for delay, it is an argument for urgency, because of the very nature of the complex way in which you design, you plan, you get regulatory approvals, you construct, you commission in terms of these large facilities. And given that nature of that complex process, then, we are arguing that in the next 6 months to the year, Canada must begin this fundamental restructuring of technology, as well as working at the same time on renewables, energy efficiency, and energy conservation. But above all, at the center of Canada's economy is the combustion technology, and focusing on that. We cannot just look at this thing from a domestic point of view, even if that is so controversial for Canadians today. And how do we do this? We look at the fact that Canada will be a net buyer of credits in the future. It can achieve some of its regulatory goals domestically, but it will also have to achieve through CDM or other processes then a means of this wider balancing. Our vision then from the National Roundtable is very much about integrated systems. Integrated in Canada in terms of our geography, integrated in terms of our different sectors and our different emissions, and integrated in terms of short, medium, and long-term goals to achieve those deep cuts which we're after. Secondly, we want to emphasize in a way in the public policy debate in Canada there hasn't been the proper emphasis of it in terms of means. Not just target, but means. Because for business, the means are equally important to the targets, because that's how you cost out achieving those targets. Thirdly, in connection with this, our vision is innovative, fundamental energy technology change, combustion technology. And this kind of transformative change for a fossil fuel-based economy like the Canadian is then absolutely essential for that transformative change which will achieve a carbon-constrained future.